We'd like now to move into our final panel of the day, and this panel, the panel members on this panel will be talking about the new legislation and its effects outside the banking world, in the financial world, outside banking, but also, as we had said at the beginning, we're not talking about insurance and securities and those kinds of things, so it's more still the financial services, non-banking effects. And to begin, we're honored to have from the National Consumer Law Center in Boston, I guess John's based, John Van Alst, who's a staff attorney at NCLC, and we'll turn it over to you, John.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much, and I want to thank Attorney General Bullock and his staff for putting this together today. It's been a fantastic event, and I want to also thank all the previous speakers. I don't know, I hope everybody here realizes how lucky you are. We've had some big muckety-mucks, and we've had a lot of powerful people who have really come and spoken to us pretty frankly, which I think is a special occasion, and I certainly am grateful that I was able to attend that. I want to also thank all the attendees here today. As a consumer advocate, I'm gratified to see this level of interest in, at least from what my perspective is, primarily sort of a consumer protection conference and discussion, and so that's heartwarming to me. I know this session is going to be on insights regarding non-bank entities in terms of what the Wall Street reform means for Main Street, and I think everybody's already mentioned there's going to be a lot of rule writing and regulation, so I don't think anyone can truthfully say they really know what it's going to mean. And what I can do is give you some insight in, as a consumer advocate, what I'd like to see, and then a little bit of opinion as to what I think we might in fact see. But before I do that, I want to take a step back because while I appreciate putting this event together and everything else, I actually do have a little bit of a beef with the name, because for me this wasn't merely a Wall Street reform bill. I think that clearly part of this, and I think a lot of the political will behind this act was generated by the financial crisis. And I think definitely a lot of what is contained in the act was a response to the financial crisis. But consumer advocates had been calling for years to address a lot of these unfair and deceptive and predatory financial products, irrespective of whether or not they were going to cause a financial crisis. I think the harm that they were doing to consumers, individual consumers, was important and needed to be addressed. If you go back and look at some of the papers that Professor Warren wrote, particularly calling for the creation of a Consumer Financial Products Safety Commission, akin to what we have in all sorts of other products. It wasn't a response to a financial crisis or anything like that. It was more an effort to protect consumers. And I would hope that all of us, if we just think about this simply, that we would all agree, that any more than you'd want to say we shouldn't have regulation over cars because people might choose to buy a car that doesn't have working brakes. The same way, you wouldn't want to not have regulation over financial products because there just are some that are truly not in the best interest of consumers, and that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today. So looking back, I guess the other issue I'd have with some of the things that we've talked about today is I definitely think a lot of the things that happened on Wall Street provided disincentives, really incentives to do the wrong thing for people. A lot of the discussion about the secondary market, about the way loans were originated and all that sort of thing, it really it gave those who were working directly with consumers and even a step or two removed from consumers little or no interest in whether or not these loans ever got repaid, but every interest in the world in just making more and more of these what for consumers were bad loans. And so I certainly think Wall Street played a huge role in what happened. But I also think just as there's culpability, I'm sure, with a fair number of consumers who either didn't pay attention to what they were doing or actively were trying to game the system or something like that. I don't deny that that probably happened too. But with my work with legal aid, there were, a lot of years where even though the incentives to do these bad things might have been coming from Wall Street, there were bad things going on Main Street too. The mortgage broker that sold my my retired school teacher client six mortgage refinances of her home that she owned over a 1-year period, with huge broker fees every time to no benefit to her, when he was sort of lying and deceiving her in terms of what the loan was. That was going on right on Main Street, So not all the bad practices were actually on Wall Street or whatnot. And a lot of these were happening front and center where the consumers were. And so I'd like to direct my comments today towards, Jim asked me to really focus on what does this mean for the consumer walking down Main Street and for the businesses there on Main Street. And I know John's going to talk a little bit more about, specific efforts in the legislation to exempt regular good merchants on Main Street to make sure they don't get captured by this. And so I'll leave that to him. I want to talk a little bit about some of the folks on Main Street who are actually selling credit as opposed to selling products and whatnot. And I'm going to start talking a little bit about one of the areas that I know best, which is auto sales and finance. And this was one of the most hotly contested areas of the new legislation. In fact, auto dealers were basically one of the only entities that managed to keep themselves out of jurisdiction of the new bureau. And I think that fight over whether or not dealers are to be included is illustrative of a lot of things. And so clearly, the consumer on Main Street, this was an effort to regulate financial products. And so if we're looking at that, some folks might wonder, well, why, auto dealers are selling cars. Why would we want to regulate them? The thing of it is, in the last few years, auto dealers actually make more money off the back end, off the finance and insurance, than they do selling the cars. So the majority of their profits are actually derived not from selling the product, but from selling the financing. And with that in mind, I think it's certainly reasonable that we'd want to see them regulated like all the other financial services providers. And in fact, I was gratified to see that credit unions and some other lenders came out, probably not entirely, disinterested. They have their own self-interest. We'd love to see recently, the last 5 or 10 years, there's been a huge decline. Credit lenders, community banks or whatnot doing direct auto loans. So many people are financing at the dealership. And often a lot of garbage is going on there that we don't see if they're financing with their credit union or somebody else. And so I think a lot of, the same conversation that was going on in the previous panel about trying to level the playing field or whatnot, I think a lot of lenders realize, well, if these, non-bank entities are going to be providing financial services, we want them regulated just like we are. So anyway, back to the fight, it took a lot of convincing to try to help staff and legislators and others understand that dealerships were actually making so much of their money from the financing rather than from the sale of the product. And also to help them understand the transaction. If you look closely at a retail installment sales contract and an auto loan, almost inevitably in every state, the dealer is not simply somebody arranging financing or something like that. If you look closely on the contract, they're the original lender. Now, these are almost inevitably immediately assigned to, GMAC or Credit Acceptance Corporation or somebody else, but the dealer is typically the original lender in these situations. And so trying to get Congress and staff up to speed on that was a fight. We had a lot of discussion earlier about, the mortgage arena and all of that, and Gary and Commissioner Brill and other folks talked about yield spread premiums, which I'm assuming most folks in the room understand. And the same sorts of thing have been going on in the auto area. In fact, we at NCLC a number of years back litigated some cases. Unfortunately, all these what are called in the auto arena dealer markups, which are really like the yield spread premiums, are basically a kickback from the lender to the mortgage broker in the mortgage case, or in the car dealing instance to the dealer to put the consumer in a higher price loan than what they would qualify for based on their credit score and whatnot. We couldn't really attack it directly, but we were able to show under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act that there was a disparate impact on minorities. In fact, minorities were paying higher DOR markups than were others, which only makes sense. You know, when you have this much discretion at the DOR level, the DOR is basically sizing you up when you walk in the door, trying to decide how much they can overcharge you for the financing. They're likely to sort of try to play fast and loose and say, well, you know, maybe if you're a minority, we can charge you more. So that's going on in auto lending, the same as it is in mortgage lending. Unfortunately, while the Act does address yield spread premiums in the mortgage context, it doesn't specifically address DOR markups. But of course, that's something the new agency can do. $20 billion, CRL reckoned in 2008, went to DOR markups. Buy here, pay here dealerships are going to be regulated by the new agency, as will larger auto lenders. Auto dealers themselves will be regulated by the FTC. Now, the FTC has had jurisdiction over auto dealers for a while. However, they've been required to regulate through the very cumbersome Magnuson-Moss rulemaking procedure. They've now got APA rulemaking authority, which means what would have been maybe an 8-9 year rulemaking process will hopefully now be maybe a 1-year rulemaking process, and I'm very hopeful we'll see some new rules and regulations coming out of the FTC in the auto area. Arbitration is another area where there's a real opportunity to do something. You know, we just recently saw, for those of you who have been paying attention, NAF, another AG action, the AG out of Minnesota, was able to show that, in fact, some of the backers of the National Arbitration Forum were in fact hedge funds that were investing in debt collection agencies, and so they had a real interest in making sure that NAF decided on behalf of their clients, basically, or themselves as debt collectors. And the new agency will actually have authority, will be required to study this issue, will have authority to regulate or ban, hopefully, arbitration clauses in consumer financial contracts. There's a whole host of things that I'd like to see the new agency do. I'm keeping my comments brief and hope that we'll have some time for discussion. And also because I've been crossing off things off my list as speakers have been talking, but throughout, every time I've seen Dave adding things rather than crossing things out. So I'm anxious to see how quickly he can get through this. But the last thing I want to say, a lot of people have mentioned this, and I want to echo this. I think the most important thing we can do, everybody said the devil's in the details. Several recent consumer victories we've seen on credit cards and other things, I think have in large part depended on comments by consumers. And so I'd love to see, as the new Bureau starts to write rules, as the FTC maybe looks to use this easier rulemaking authority and whatnot, community banks, credit unions, consumers especially, I want to see all of them actually commenting and letting regulators know what they ought to be doing. So that's what I'd ask everyone to do. I hope we have time for questions and comments, and I think I'm out of time, so I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, John. Now we'll hear from David Horn, who is the Northwest Regional Assistant Director for the Federal Trade Commission out of Seattle, and a good friend of us in Montana. Their office is very cooperative, and we enjoy a good working relationship and look forward now to Dave's comments.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Horn. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you. Before I begin helping you, let me mention that my opinions are not necessarily those of the Federal Trade Commission, its staff, or any particular commissioner. This morning was the first time I've ever heard anyone from the Federal Trade Commission speak to an audience without giving that disclaimer, and that's because she was a commissioner. She doesn't have to give it. To paraphrase Ross Perot's running mate, who am I and what am I doing here? The Federal Trade Commission is the nation's consumer protection agency. We do at the federal level what Attorney General Bullock and Jim and their crew do at the state level, which is that we enforce the law that prohibits people from engaging in unfair and deceptive tactics. Our business is about 90% enforcement against deception, and the mandate is quite broad. We sue people who are making a living by lying to their customers one way or another. We do some privacy enforcement and some do not call enforcement, that sort of thing, but it is mostly deception, and it includes deception in marketing loans, mortgages, refinances, financial products, as well as other kinds of deception, such as false advertising we've heard a little bit about today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Dodd-Frank bill, the financial reform bill, did for the FTC. That's brief. Second, what I think Dodd-Frank means to you, and then third, how we're using our enforcement authority at the FTC. First, what Dodd-Frank has done for the FTC, you've heard a little bit about this already. The big drama all winter and spring and early summer at the FTC was whether we were going to keep our enforcement authority or not. The outcome is that we kept all of our enforcement authority, which I took as a compliment from Congress. My opinions are not necessarily those of the Federal Trade Commission staff commissioner, but we took it as a sign of confidence. At the same time, it's great that there will be another cop on the beat and more enforcers. We did get jurisdiction over auto dealers, as John and others have said. This is a big new project at the agency. There will be a process of going out and getting input from people out there who are concerned about auto dealers, either who are auto dealers or are concerned about practices that they see in the industry. The bigwigs in D.C. are currently developing a process that will probably involve hearings held outside of Washington, D.C. They will be meeting with organizations and individuals who have an interest in the area and looking at whether we need to make rules, and if so, what those rules ought to say. And I should add that our enforcement with respect to auto dealers and auto lending won't necessarily wait for any new rules to be in place, because that, you said a year, I think that's optimistic, but I don't know. It does take a little while to make rules in the federal process. We also have a couple other rulemakings. The debt settlement rule that was discussed by a couple of speakers, which is it's an amendment to the telemarketing sales rule. It only applies to those who are doing debt settlement by telephone, or at least enticing you by telephone, but that's the bulk of the industry. Again, they'd be prohibited from taking upfront fees, and that's going into effect. There is a rulemaking pending where there are proposals to do a similar thing with loan modifications, and these are people who call you up or otherwise advertise and say, hey, give me just $4,000 and I'll get you a much better rate on your mortgage. In some cases, they promise to reduce the principal, reduce your monthly payment dramatically, and you get to keep your house. And typically, people pay that money, and then that's it. They paid their money, and there's never any service provided. Second, what does Dodd-Frank do for you? I made a brief list of highlights, a few of which have been touched on, but these are some of my favorites. Again, mentioning that my opinions are not necessarily those of the Federal Trade Commission, its staff, or any particular commissioner. Brokers will lose their incentives to steer borrowers into high-interest subprime loans. Some prepayment penalties will be banned for a lot of these subprime loans and adjustable rate mortgages. Mortgage lenders, this is somewhat revolutionary considering what's been going on for the last decade. Mortgage lenders will have to determine that a borrower can afford the loan and document that. That sounds kind of silly, but there have been lots of loans made in situations where the lenders knew perfectly well that the borrowers couldn't afford it, but since they were going to sell the loan to someone else who would sell it to someone else, they didn't care if it got paid back or not. That's a big change, and that's important. There are some balloon payments that will be banned in HOPA loans. There will be the hope is one unified disclosure for people taking out a mortgage I don't know what this is going to look like in practice. I mean, those of you who've bought a house or refinanced, you know well the experience of sitting down and having the phone book of paper plopped in front of you. I just get a hard time from escrow people because I read everything. And they whisper to each other, he's reading everything. Anyway, but there should be a simplified disclosure that will help. And then for the lifting of preemption on states is huge. It's just huge, and it's great that Steve Bullock and crew will have authority to enforce a lot of this stuff. But letting the states regulate things like balloon payments, adjustable rate mortgages, negative amortization, where you pay and pay and pay for years, and then you owe more than you did when you started. That's negative amortization. Letting those things be regulated by the states is a leap forward. How Dodd-Frank will affect businesses, and how many of you own or run a business here? Okay, several people. If you deny credit to somebody based on their credit report, you have to disclose to them what their credit score is. That's a way of educating consumers about their situation. For people who are wiring money overseas, there are several new protections in place, disclosures, and also some protections to make sure that the money doesn't end up getting stolen. And this protects not only people who are wiring money to their families in other countries, but also people who get these fake checks. Somebody calls you, says you've won a prize, they mail you a check for $5,000. It looks real. You take it to the bank and you get credit for it. Because it's a foreign check, it takes a couple weeks to bounce because there's nothing behind it. But they tell you that the price you have to pay is you've got to then wire back, I don't know, $800 to pay fees or taxes or something. So your wire to them is real. Their check to you is fake, and they get your money and you don't get anything. So I think those protections will help some in that situation. Another change that I think is enormous is that merchants, those of you who have businesses, do you take credit card payments? Anybody take credit cards? Okay, some people take credit cards. You have to pay fees for that. And some of you pay huge fees for that. It costs you a lot of money to accept payment by credit card. Merchants will be able to offer discounts to customers who want to pay by other means, by cash or by check. We may see the return of cash in this country. We may see checks coming back into play, and there are some restrictions on that. But that's a very helpful thing, I think, to a lot of you who are merchants. And then, a lot of what's in the bill, there's going to be a new agency. It's going to have new authority. There's going to be some shuffling of who does what. I really think the big story for most of you is that there will be a lot more enforcement resources. There haven't been enough, and my opinions don't necessarily reflect those of anyone else, but it is great that there will be this new agency that has authority. And in terms of the rulemaking, I don't know what the rules are going to say, but a lot of the details and how this is going to play out, it's simply unknown just yet. And while a number of people have mentioned that the devil is in the details. I used to have a friend who was an architect who liked to say that God is in the details too. So maybe the details won't be all bad. I wanted to mention a little bit about how we are using our enforcement authority in this area, particularly in our region. I had a case against a company in Oregon that we just settled. They mailed a little, little plastic card. They mailed this thing to millions of people around the country. You have already been approved. It referred to it as a platinum card. It looked like a real credit card. And the thing that really enticed people was it offered the promise of immediate access to $7,500 in cash. They're mailing this to people who are in debt up to their eyeballs. They're in serious trouble on debt. They don't have any cash. They don't have any access to cash. If they got a flat tire, they wouldn't have the money to get it fixed. And so $7,500 was huge. So people would call up and respond and initially say yes to all this. A bunch of money, varying amounts, would sort of randomly disappear from their checking accounts, and then they'd figure out what was going on and would cancel. But you know what the cash advance was? It was an opportunity to apply for a payday loan from a third party. Well, these were uniformly people who already had taken out all the payday loans that they could, and they weren't going to get approved for a payday loan from anybody. So we shut that down and got their, cars and mansions and stuff, which is always satisfying. Well, it is. I enjoy that part of my work. Terribly sorry, sir, but we'll need the keys to your Lamborghini. AMS Mortgage, which was operating out of Spokane, it was AMS Financial. It was a debt relief company. Pay us $800, $900, $1,000, $1,500, and we will magically make the interest rates on your credit cards go from 25% down to 2.999%. I'm not making that up, by the way, 2.999%. And so they'd take the money and then they didn't do anything. So we shut them down, and I don't think they had any Lamborghinis. Somebody has a trailer. We're discussing how much the trailer's worth. But Idaho, last year we sued another fake loan modification company. Anybody from Idaho? You can, if you're shopping for a fake loan mod, they're you can get a better deal in Idaho. They're a little bit cheaper. We've done some enforcement in Montana, not really with financial products, but I'll close with this. I was at a preliminary injunction hearing yesterday in Orange County, California, against a company called U.S. Homeowners Relief, another fake loan mod company. We had people who paid $4,000 for a loan mod, and then the company just stopped returning their calls, changed the name of the company, disappeared. One of the consumer declarations we filed was a woman named Crystal. She recounted that her husband was in the military. He had a top security clearance, top secret security clearance, which presumably is hard to get. She lost her job and was working part-time, and he's off somewhere doing his top secret thing, and they got in trouble on their mortgage. And she talked to these people. She was very skeptical. She consulted friends and experts, and finally decided to trust them and paid them $4,000 to fix their mortgage, and couldn't reach them anymore. So they lost their house. Their credit rating went in the tank. Because his credit rating went in the tank, her husband lost his security clearance. And because he lost his security clearance, he lost his job. I mean, he's still in the Marines, but he's doing something else. So I guess what I want to respond to, somebody this morning said, that we're saying to you, you're not smart enough to manage your own finances, so we're going to manage them for you. And all of us feel that way to some extent. Your business is your business. But there's another side to it. And when you go into foreclosure, my neighbors and I are hurt by it. And when you find yourself in bankruptcy, all the people you owe money to, they're all hurt by it. And when somebody is making $20,000 a year, and as we heard this morning, they're paying $1,000 of those dollars in fees to a payday lender, that's money that they would be using to pump into the community to buy real products and services. All of us are hurt by those things, and I think all of us have to look at this as a community, and we're trying to save our community as a whole. And let me repeat that my opinions are not necessarily those of the people.
Thank you, Dave. And now we'll turn it to John Benyon, who's a staff attorney with the Montana Chamber of Commerce based in Helena. John?
Good afternoon. Wanted to thank Attorney General Bullock and his staff for inviting me out to speak. This is an important bill. We've seen a lot of things out of Washington recently, and it's something pretty substantial that I'm glad that we're talking about it. As Jim said, I'm with the Montana Chamber of Commerce. We're the state's leading business advocate on issues ranging from workers' compensation to taxes to energy to government regulation. We have about 1,500 members statewide of all sizes, all different kinds of industries from all different parts of the state. And but the vast majority of them are small businesses. If you look at the SBA statistics for Montana, they say almost 98% of the businesses in Montana are considered small businesses, and those businesses employ about 70% of the workforce. So needless to say, Montana is small business. I speak here today not as an expert on this bill. I wasn't one of the lobbyists on the bill. I'm certainly not an insider on this type of an issue. I'm not going to be one of the regulators, but what I hope to give to you today is a little bit of a perspective from a small business person in Montana, especially coming from the non-financial sector. We've spent a lot of time today talking about how this meltdown came about. How did this financial crash happen? We've heard a lot of blame going around. I think a lot of people can agree that some of the bad actors in Wall Street were to blame. There were some very large banks engaged in some questionable things that were to blame. But you also hear a couple other interesting theories, whether it be Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, former President Bush, the federal government as a whole, Barney Frank, overspending American public. There's a lot of just noise out there about how it all came about. But one of the things I never heard is that small businesses were to blame. That somehow, especially Montana small businesses engaged in non-financial type transactions or, kinds of the industry, that they weren't to blame. They're not the ones that have been blamed for this cause. And so the bill that we saw go through Congress was largely they tried to target the Wall Street firms, the big banks. And we're going to talk a little bit about today just whether or not they were successful in that or whether they roped in more people than they sold it as. The rules have yet to be written, as everyone has said. There's a lot more details to work out. Just like any other piece of legislation, the way that it started out is not how it was passed. There was a lot of debate. There were a lot of different lobbyists in D.C. There were a lot of discussions we had with our federal delegation. There were things in the bill that we liked, things that we didn't like. Some of those things we didn't like came out. Some of them stayed in. But we're not here to re-debate this. It's the law of the land now. So how is it going to affect people? So if the small businesses, especially Montana small businesses, were not to blame for this, what are their hopes and fears going forward as this becomes the law of the land? I think there are three things that I want to talk about today. First of all, Montana small businesses, by and large, want to make sure that the financial reforms can prevent another meltdown like we saw. These things that were largely taking place, in large firms, not happening in Montana, they had a severe impact not only on the national economy, but Montana has hurt as well. We haven't seen the extent of the economic damage as maybe in other parts of the country, but we've felt it nonetheless. They also want to make sure the reforms don't make the economy worse by adding unprecedented levels of adding to the unprecedented levels of economic uncertainty and drying up credit for their small businesses. And like I said earlier, they want to make sure it doesn't negatively impact their own business directly by overburdensome regulation. since they were not the cause of the economic meltdown. So let's go to the first part, and that is preventing another meltdown. First of all, I think we all recognize that you don't necessarily fix a problem just by passing a bill. The bill itself has to first be targeted at the problem itself, adequately deal with it, be properly executed, and carry out the will of the legislature, and then make sure it's not overreaching into other areas that were not the problem or not addressed in the bill. Somebody's already mentioned today that there were 2,315 pages in this bill, pretty substantial. There's going to be, for every page of that bill, there's going to be multiple pages of regulations and rules written. According to the National Chamber of Commerce, the bill creates up to 350 required regulatory rulemakings, 47 new studies, and 74 reports. By contrast, Sarbanes-Oxley, which was passed in 2002, had about 16 rulemakings and 16 studies. So needless to say, no one can say for sure, because so much of it has yet to be done, whether or not this is going to prevent another meltdown. In the words of the chief sponsor and architect of the bill, Senator Chris Dodd of Connecticut, no one will know until this is actually in place how it works. So we are hopeful. We want to make sure that we can do what is necessary to make sure that the meltdown will not happen again, but I guess the jury is still out on that. The second question, whether or not this bill will make the economy worse, especially in the short term, by adding to the unprecedented levels of economic uncertainty and drying up credit. Let me talk about a few of the hurdles currently facing Montana small businesses right now. There's flat consumer confidence at best. In some cases, we see it go down depending on the poll. Healthcare costs are still going up. Some small businesses will benefit by the federal healthcare reforms that were passed, just the the credits that are available. But healthcare costs are still going up, and there's a lot more implementation of those of that bill, both at the federal and state level, that is still kind of up in the air. There's still a threat of a climate change type bill that could drive up costs for energy consumers and also impact some pretty major Montana anchor industries. Federal taxes, somebody brought that up today in the questions. A huge question looming out there. In a few months, everyone is facing tax increases. That adds an incredible amount of uncertainty to our economic picture. Is Congress or the NLRB going to significantly change labor laws over the next few months, over the next few years? We don't know. Specifically for Montana businesses, Montana has the #1 workers' compensation premiums in the country. Compared to our neighbors who enjoy some of the rates more in the bottom third, according to a national study, that puts Montana businesses at a huge competitive disadvantage to neighboring states. When we try and lure people to come to our state, that's huge. That's a lot of uncertainty. Medical marijuana, that's going to be something that's dealt with. 9 months ago, it was not an issue, but a lot of employers face big questions about employment law as it relates to medical marijuana use in the workplace, drug testing, and workplace safety. One of the last things is just Montana, although we've done better than the national and a lot of other states when it comes to our own state budget, based on legislative fiscal division projections and on present law adjustments and spending going on to the future, lawmakers are going to have to try and bridge a $300 to $400 million budget shortfall for the next biennium. So are they going to try and balance the budget on the backs of small business? We don't know. That will be yet to be seen. So all of those things which aren't necessarily related to why we're here today. It's the Financial Regulatory Reform Bill. That this adds to the level of uncertainty. I got the 2-minute mark, so I want to go into the parts of the bill that actually I think improved. There were some amendments there in the last couple of months that relate to addressing small business concerns. One is the Regulatory Flexibility Act. Going forward in the rulemaking process, that is something that the government is going to have to comply with. I don't like the name of that act. It makes it sound like small businesses get to break rules or whatever. It's been around at the federal level for 30 years. About 42 other states have it. Montana does not, but don't get me talking about that. We're going to try and change that. But what it does is it says when you're making rules, you have to study the impacts that it's going to have on small business, see if there are more reasonable, less costly alternatives that will still accomplish the same goals, and make sure that there's no overlapping or conflicting rules. According to the SBA, small businesses spend more than $2,830 more on average per employee than larger firms to comply with federal and state regulation. In a report just issued by the SBA entitled The Impact of Regulatory Costs on Small Businesses, the impact of regulation is over $1.75 trillion per year to the small business community. For firms with fewer than 20 employees, they spend about $10,585 per employee to comply with federal regulations versus firms with over 500, which is about 7,755 employees. This act, the Financial Regulatory Reform Bill, creates small business advocacy review panels within the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau through the Regulatory Flexibility Act. And they consist of a lot of different players, and so we're hopeful that that will be in place. I know my time's up, but I have to do one more. One of the other amendments actually tries to exempt out non-financial merchants, non-financial small businesses that don't securitize their debt. The rules on here, I could get a little bit more specific, but basically if you keep your accounts in-house, you're exempt. If the credit that you issue does not significantly exceed the market value of the good or service, then you are not, or then you're exempt. And if the merchant is exempt from the authority under this act, that doesn't mean that they're somehow free of regulation altogether. There's still the state attorneys general. There's still the FTC. So as the rulemaking goes forward, it's going to be important to make sure that these small businesses that were not intended to be a part of this bill continue to be able to function in the way that allows them to create jobs and grow their business.
Thank you, John. I'd like to take a moment and thank each of the panelists. Again, I think very informative, and the perspectives are very valuable to hear. And if we'd give them a round of applause here, and we'll have room. We have time for a couple questions. If anyone would like to address, again, to any specific panelist or to the group as a whole. Any questions? We're getting late in the day. Yeah, Brett?
I think my question was for Dave. You had mentioned some increased protections regarding some of these overseas type scams. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I deal with that very regularly. So
I can give you, I don't know the details. I can give you a copy. It's actually, I got this from an NCLC summary of the bill. But I know that there are disclosures up front. One of the things that if you wire money to somebody, one of the things you end up with a copy of is contact information for the person who receives it. And then there are some other, I don't know the details of it, but I can find that for you. So let's talk after.
Any other questions? Yes.
Now, pawn shops, nowhere on the radar screen in this bill, right? I mean, they're exempt. Is that correct? I mean, am I understanding that correctly?
John, do you know the answer to that?
Well, I wouldn't say that that's clear yet. You know, I think there's some real question about whether or not rent to own is going to be covered. I think, you know, pawn shops definitely, earlier John talked about some of the exemptions for small businesses and the ways that they're extending credit. I don't think necessarily the merchant exception would apply to pawn shops. Yeah, I think there's the possibility that they might be covered. But I think we'll have to wait and see more when the regulations come out.
Any other questions? Well, on behalf of Steve and the entire Attorney General's office, we want to again thank everyone, thank our panelists. I think it was a great day of lots of information, lots of perspectives, and thank all of you for your interest and your commitment in being here, and have safe travels home, and thank you very, very much.